Let it go, make my body go, make our bodies higher.
There are many different situations when you're working with Excel where you need to change the layout of a worksheet. Maybe you want to put in a new column or a new row, or in some cases delete a column or a row. You can do that relatively easy and quickly. You can also at different times simply add cells, push data down. You can delete cells. We can do this across rows or across columns. In this particular worksheet called Insert Delete, it's in our file called O5 Layout, maybe we've decided that we need to keep track of people by their status. In other words, maybe some of these people are part-time, and we don't see that in the list here. And we want a new column to the left of column D. Now, if you didn't know how to insert a new column, you might begin by clicking the column, but then what? On the Home tab, there's a choice called Insert, and that's certainly helpful. We could insert sheet columns. We could click that. And nothing wrong with that, and I'm certainly not saying that's not the best way to do it. But I think it's handier much of the time to use the right mouse button. Let me use Control Z here. I'm going to right-click on column D, and there's Insert. Now, it doesn't say columns, so if you're relatively new with Excel, Insert sometimes doesn't quite say what it means. In this case, it doesn't, but it does mean new column to the left. We can get there that way. Now, after thinking about it for a bit, maybe making some other changes, you've decided, I just can't get to that yet. I don't need that empty column. Maybe you've done other actions in the meantime, so you can't do an undo. How do we get rid of this? We can use the same feature. In other words, we don't have to go elsewhere. I'm going to right-click column D and delete. Now, here's another thought. We want to add a new record here. We could add it at the bottom, although maybe this person is in account management. We want to put it in the list near that group. Maybe we want to add it above row 90 here. We could do that if we wanted to, or maybe we want to add it in place. Maybe the person's name is Abbott and we want to add it above row 2, something like that. It's not always the best way to do it. If I right-click row 2, I can choose Insert. It puts in a new row, and I could fill in the data. Notice how I copied the color down. I might want to get rid of that. But as I scroll to the right, would that have been a good idea? It looks like I've split other data. Now, it's up to you to know what's on your worksheet, and although this is not a horrible result here, I think you can sense what might happen if we do this with certain other rows. I'm going to press Control Z to undo that last action. What if I were not thinking clearly and I want to insert a new row above row 6? Right-click, Insert. I could fill in my data here, nothing wrong with that part of it, but scrolling to the right, I've introduced a gaping hole in this table. Maybe I'm going to use that later for lookup purposes, and then the list over here obviously is not what we would want it to be. So there will be times where instead of inserting a row, you might want to insert cells. I'm going to press Control Z again. So if we wanted to add new data here, we would highlight just this data. Right-click, Insert. Notice now the option has 3 dots behind it, meaning there's more to come. We're going to see a dialog box. Shift cells down would be the option we want here. Now this is not going to touch data to the right. Keep an eye on column L. As I click OK, it will shift all these cells from row 6 downward. We're not losing anything here, but now we can fill in the data. The data to the right has not been disturbed at all. So we can start adding our new data here. Now once again, I'm reconsidering and don't have the time to do this, so I'll press Control Z. And similarly, you could imagine the same situation. You're looking at this data here. Maybe you want to add Pennsylvania to the list, and you want to put it above Illinois. So you can highlight these cells here. Right-click and Insert. Shift these cells down. Put in your Pennsylvania data. We have not disrupted anything to the left. Now, another possibility here, and you want to be a little bit careful with this, of course. Let's say that we say, for example, Danielle has left the list here. Let's get rid of Danielle's record. If we delete the row, you can imagine what's going to be happening. Now, you don't always see that data to the right. Again, it's a reminder. Be sure you know what you're doing here. Be looking ahead. If we're not seeing the data to the right, well, that's an oversight on our parts. And if we delete row 5 here, we will be deleting all of row 5, including the data over here that's currently highlighted. So in this case, if we simply wanted to get rid of this information here, the information for Danielle Atkinson, highlight these cells. Right-click and delete. Shift cells up. We want the cells below to be shifted up. The information for Danielle Atkinson will disappear. And it's gone. Nothing to the right got disrupted. always be alert to that concept. We can insert and delete columns or rows. We can insert and delete cells. And of course, it makes a difference at different times. The other concern here, and one that if you work with Excel you don't worry about too much anymore, is that Excel, for the most part, automatically adjusts formulas as we insert and delete. You might or might not be familiar with the kind of formula that's in column E here, but this calculates years of service, in this case based on what's in D2. And all the formulas below, of course, deal with column D. If I want a new column, I suggested this earlier with the status column, if I right-click column D and insert, and we're eventually going to put in data here, let's say, what happened to the formula in column F? Instead of referring to D2, it now refers to E2. And nearly always, when you insert rows and columns, you don't worry about your formulas. Excel automatically adjusts them. And that's comforting because that would take a lot of work to adjust otherwise in some cases. I'm going to delete this, and sure enough, the reference is now back to D2, as you would hope and want it to be. So lots of situations here where we insert and delete, and I strongly recommend using the right mouse button. Again, nothing wrong with those commands on the Home tab, but it's a lot easier when you use the right mouse button to insert and delete columns and rows, or in some cases, simply cells. When you work with certain lists of data, there are going to be times when you say, I don't really need to see that data very often. We don't want to get rid of it, we simply want to hide it. I'm going to print this out. That's another reason. I just don't want certain data to be on the printout. For example, compensation. It's semi-confidential. I don't want to see column H for a while. I'll right-click column H and hide the column. If we print this, we will not see a gaping hole there. Typically, you do not print showing the column letter, so no one necessarily knows there's data there. If you would like to get a quick print preview, you can press Control F2. You can also go to the File tab and select Print. So there's a preview, and we don't see any missing column in there, although we certainly have hidden a column. Press Escape, and go right back into the worksheet environment here. Notice that there's an indicator between G and I, a double line there, and of course you know your alphabet, and there's a missing letter there. But we are reminded of the fact that there's a hidden column there. There could be times when you want to hide multiple columns. I'm about to print this. It's not important for the moment which building people are working in, and we don't necessarily need to see their hire date. So I'm going to select column B, and now with the Control key held down, I'm going to select column E, and then right-click and hide. Looks like this. Once again, print preview, Control F2. So certainly sometimes the rationale for using hiding is simply, I want to print the data, I don't want to print everything. Press Escape to get out of here. How do we get these back? If it's only a single column, we can drag across the surrounding columns and either right-click and unhide. That brings back the hidden data. Or pressing Control Z to undo. With these selected, we can simply double-click the column boundary between the two. Double-click. Let me again press Control Z. We've got multiple columns hidden, and maybe there's other data way off to the right. Are there other hidden columns? We don't necessarily want to go checking. Let's just click in the upper left corner, and then we can either right-click anywhere on any column letter and unhide. All hidden columns will reemerge. Control Z to undo. Another way to do this, if we've selected the entire worksheet, upper left corner, we could simply double-click one of the column boundaries. And the column boundary we choose doesn't necessarily have to include a hidden column, for example, between C and D. By double-clicking, we are saying, in effect, take every single column in the worksheet, because we've selected the whole worksheet, and make every column be a so-called best fit. And that brings back all the hidden data. So it's real easy to manage these. It's a pretty obvious thing to say. Always look at worksheets that you're not too familiar with to see if there are any hidden columns, but I'm amazed over the years how I failed to do that at certain times and then later discovered or just thought to look, and yeah, there was a hidden column and I just didn't look for it. We can also hide rows. Maybe looking at the data here, the reason might be we want to print out this worksheet. For the moment, we don't need to see the ADC people's names here. We'll just drag across row numbers 90 through 94. Right-click and hide. We're not seeing those. There too, notice the indicator between 89 and 95, the double line there. Another example could be, we're looking at the list here, Michael Ashley has left the organization. We don't want to remove the name from the list just yet, but we don't want it to be printed, so we'll right-click row 4 and hide row 4. And getting these back is very similar to what we do with columns. If it's simply 1 or 2 rows that are hidden here, we drag across the surrounding columns and either right-click and unhide, that'll get us there, or pressing Control-Z again to undo, drag across these, and double-click the boundary. That brings them back. Once again, undoing, we've got other hidden rows down below, and up here as well. Select the entire worksheet. With the entire worksheet selected and hidden rows between rows 3 and 5, and also later down the list, we'll simply right-click and unhide, or double-click any row boundary. And all hidden rows return. So the area down here, the ADC people, they're now visible. So it's an easy feature to manage. It's up to you to keep an eye on the idea that possibly data that you're looking at that you didn't create has hidden columns or hidden rows. Easy to get back, as we saw in the examples. We're looking at the worksheet called Move Copy Insert in our 05 layout file. There certainly are times when you say, I need a copy of this data. For example, in this worksheet, this is a projection for the year 2016. And we see some numbers here. We might want to experiment with these and have another copy of this same layout with formulas down below. Using the slider bar in the lower right-hand corner, I'm going to zoom back a little bit. We've got other data off to the right that we'll get to. I'd like to copy this data down to row 17. Now, a familiar technique for a lot of people is to copy this data and then paste it. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And there are any number of different ways to do this. We've got buttons here on the Home tab. Some people are familiar with Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. You can certainly do that. But you can also drag data, and often that's going to be the fastest. I simply want a copy of this data down in row 17. Now, if I wanted to move it, and based on the layout we're seeing here, that's probably not likely, but I could, after selecting the data, simply drag any edge. Drag it down here. I've moved the data. I didn't really want to do that, though, so I'll press Control-Z. But that's very easy to do. And often it's going to be the fastest way, unless you're moving the data, for example, hundreds of rows or columns downward or rightward. If we'd like to make a copy of this, we do almost the same thing, but we hold down the Control key. You don't have to hold it down immediately, but as you're holding it down eventually, you'll see a tiny little plus that accompanies the arrow as you drag this. Drag it down to here. Be sure to let go of the mouse first. We've made a copy of it. And the formulas up here, as I zoom back a little bit again, formulas up here, for example, that deal with rows 4 and 5 are automatically copied down here so that they're dealing with data in rows 19 and 20. So we don't worry about our formulas as we do this. We've made a copy of it. And maybe we're experimenting with some different numbers here in our projections. That could be one of the reasons for copying the data. All of our formulas, as I suggested, also get copied as well. Another way to do this, not necessarily better, I'm going to take this data here, highlight it, and press delete. Highlighting the data again, you can also drag this data with the right mouse button. And once again, you can drag any edge. I'll drag the bottom edge with the right mouse button. Right mouse button always means shortcut menu. Drag it down to here. I'll let go of the right mouse button, and there's a menu. I'll simply select copy here, and that's done. It's easily handled. When you're doing this too, there's no rule or law that says the copy has to be in the same set of columns, though often it would make sense, as we saw here. And when we're moving data, remember too, I can move this by selecting it, drag any edge, move it over there, move it over here. All the formulas get readjusted as we do this. So many times, dragging the data is likely to be the fastest and easiest way to either copy or move data. Now, there are times too when you want to do a move and insert. Some of you sharp-eyed observers there might have noticed already. There's something a little bit strange in this worksheet. In row 4, we've got sales, and then expenses. Formulas in row 6 to calculate profits. Down in row 9, we're tracking the percent of sales change. But then, oddly enough, we've got profits and expenses, whereas up above, it's expenses above profits. Wouldn't it make sense to take this data here and have it appear between sales and profits, between rows what are now 9 and 10? Now we can do this. In Excel, you can insert. In other words, move and insert at the same time. Now, if you don't know the shortcut, what you can do here is right-click row 10, add a new row, move the data up, then get rid of the empty row, and so on. It might take a little bit of time. Now, what we're about to do, we could do for an entire row. However, there's data off to the right. We don't want to disturb that. So we'll simply highlight these cells right here. And if we'd like to move them upward, all we've got to do is to drag the top edge here with the Shift key held down. Drag it up to there. Let go of the mouse first. We've moved the data. All of our formulas get readjusted properly where necessary. Everything is working just fine. And we can do this with column data as well, either entire columns or just cells. We've decided for whatever reason it's going to make sense to put the department to the left of the building. So we click the column for department, the entire column this time. We will be dragging the left edge with the Shift key held down, drag it leftward to here, let go of the mouse, and we've done that. At different times we do this with multiple columns. For whatever reason, we like to take these two columns here, maybe shift them to the right between benefits and compensation. I'm going to drag any edge, maybe the top edge, with the Shift key held down, drag it over to the right here, put it between benefits and compensation. Over it here, let go of the right mouse button first. But you can see how easy it is to do this. So rather than going through the longer 2-step, 3-step process of inserting a new column, moving the data, then getting rid of the empty column, why not simply drag the data with the Shift key to move and insert the data? So it's easy to manipulate your data. And the more you get comfortable with these, the more you have a sense that no matter how the worksheet looks, we can easily redesign the look of our worksheet layout by moving data, copying data, or moving and inserting data. Sometimes you're looking for data in a large list. Sometimes you're actually trying to replace data. We're looking at a sheet called Find Replace. Those two features are actually located in the same place in the Excel menu system. Let's imagine that in this list, we've got in column D, status. And a company that operates this organization has said, we don't want to use the term half-time anymore. We've got a number of people who are working quarter time, 3/4 time. We'd rather use the term part-time. So we want to replace the word half with part. And it occurs many times in this list, and the list can be huge. It's always best if you're trying to find or replace data to narrow the search first. So rather than looking in the entire list, and that's what would happen if we click a single cell and then start to look. Let's click just column D. On the Home tab in the ribbon, the far right button, Find and Select. Let's simply replace. Now we can do a find at times, of course, that makes sense. We're just looking for data. Let's do that first, actually, since it appears first here. What if we're looking for half? Notice there's an Options button here. If we were trying to look for only that content and nothing else in the cell, match entire cell contents is what we would choose. We're not trying to do that. No cell here contains half and half only. Match case, sometimes important. Here it's not important. We don't care about it. We just want to search automatically here. Find the next or find all. If we choose find all, and we'll expand this dialog box, there's quite a few of them in there. We can see the list. Now, if we do want to replace these, let's click the Replace tab here. Let's replace half with part. We don't have to worry about the hyphens. They're going to stay in place. Again, be careful here with whether you want to match case or not. We don't, and nor do we want to match entire cell contents. And we'll simply do a Replace All. And Excel tells us 96 replacements. We can certainly see that's happened in cell D3 and certainly others on the screen as well. Now, you can also find and or replace based on formatting as well. We see the word hourly there, it's in yellow. There's another one. Maybe these people have been tagged earlier because they've been offered full-time positions. So, what we might want to do is replace all the hourlies that are yellow. Find what? Hourly. Replace with full-time. That's the way it's spelled in the other entries. Find what? We're looking for the format here where it's filled with yellow. Now, when we replace it, we don't necessarily want to replace it with a color, so we can leave this blank. Now, if for whatever reason we said let's replace this with blue format, fine, we could do that. We would continue to have them highlighted, but now they'd be blue instead of yellow. But hourly would be replaced by full-time. Now, in this case, match entire cell contents, yes. Now, it wouldn't really make a huge difference here because in no other entry here do we see hourly along with other text. But nevertheless, it makes sense here. Match entire cell contents. Let's replace all. There are two of them. And you see what's happened on the screen. There's full-time. It's in blue. We replaced hourly with full-time. We changed the yellow to blue. Again, we didn't have to use color in the replacement. We did in the find. You see it's happened right there. So there are a number of reasons for using find and replace. Here's another one. The Taft building has just been renamed the Harding building. We're selecting column B again to narrow it down. Find and select. Replace. Find what? Taft. Tab Harding. And here, no format. Clear find format. Clear find format. Match entire cell contents makes sense here. Fine. Replace all. 63 replacements. Now, you can also use the find feature, although possibly at times filtering might work better. We're looking for Rick. The only place we see people's names are in column A, so let's select column A, find and select, find Rick. Here we want to make sure we're not matching entire cell contents, so let's uncheck that. And moving this up, because we might have a few. Find all. Make this a bit larger. Well, we found them, but we also found Strickland and Patrick. In other words, R-I-C-K is found in these entries. Now, we don't have that many, so let's say we probably found the Rick that we were looking for, but do recognize how R-I-C-K here is found within words, not just any word. I didn't choose match case, possibly that would help. Use match case here. I'll again select column A and look for Rick that way. See if that narrows it. Find all. And it does substantially. We also picked up Ricky along the way too, but nothing wrong with that. So you can begin to see how this is working. And those of you who know Filter might compare and contrast it with this particular way of doing it too. We see these in a different kind of list here. More often than not, replace has a role to play here where it doesn't when you're doing filtering. So great tools here, find and replace, found in the Home tab under Find and Select, the far right button.